Thank you all for joining us. This is our second to last in this webinar series before we will take a little bit of a pause. And I just wanted to say, I learned today in terms of the Entrepreneurship Institute, for those who were there, you know that we had extraordinary cases this year. I think probably richer than ever owing to COVID, but also we had an amazing tapestry of investors there. And so I'm really pleased to tell you that all but two of our cases that were presented are in active discussions now to close on financings. And so that's, I feel very good about the service that we're kind of providing here. And it's obvious in the feedback that I've gotten since the HEI that is, as was just evidenced in this poll, strategy, but also cash, access to capital is really one of the top things on most of our minds. So when we do resume, we will pick up on those themes. And I will also just say quickly before getting to Jane that we had many cases who were unable to present. We had 80 who applied to be pitching for money. We had a packed schedule of 14 in the day, but for the other 66, we are, and for others who would like to present your case for capital to our growing cohort of investors, we are working, when Carlene gets back, we are working on putting together a kind of a clearinghouse, a place where you can put your pitch up and connect you with folks who would be looking and interested in helping in your space right now. There's for the investors, there's a paucity of the usual ways that they would be meeting or encountering or screening investors, pitches, because obviously there's no conferences happening. And conversely, that works against the entrepreneurs as well. We have one more in our series, and I just need to say we're going out strong with two really inspiring women leaders in our industry. Today we will obviously hear from Jane in just a moment. Marci Zaroff, the sort of eco-fashion, well, I'll just say she's my eco-fashion mentor, but then again, she probably doesn't want to be associated with my fashion choices, but she is Marci is a true model of resilience, of bouncing back, of my adage that, entrepreneurship is not about how you do when things are going great. It's how you do when you've been knocked flat on your you-know-what, and it's about getting back up. Now this leads me to Jane, who I'm really delighted is here. And in case you're wondering what brand she is, I can give you a little hint. Well done. Good. I'm telling you, you should have gone first, because you're branding just about as well as anybody I know. But seriously, Jane, by her own admission, is not an entrepreneur, as in a founder, but her mark in this space is really significant. I can tell you, you probably overheard me at the beginning saying, can we do a gender question? I know that we're 2/3 women, and that's what I was saying to you, Jane. And so for me, it's actually fabulous to end our series, or end this phase of our series, with two really inspiring women leaders. And Jane's background is even more complicated, because she really began her career in the CPG space in over on the evil empire side, right, with Frito-Lay. And I say that with a smile, because of course the lines between our worlds have disappeared in my day. And in fact, as I sat on the board of Late July forever, I know now terribly well how those lines are gone. In fact, the growth in the better for you sector has really been a magnet for these larger companies. So Jane made the move from a very large company with obviously an enormous footprint out there to the exact opposite side of the spectrum, coming over to Rudy's Organics. And obviously she's now with this company that you can see right here with Lilies. And I've asked Jane to tell us your story and obviously talk to us about challenges you've had to overcome along the way. And then just to remind everybody, as ever, please use the Q&A function get your questions in, and we will be sure to get to as many of them as we can. So with no further ado, Jane Miller, welcome.
Great, thanks Gary, and hello everybody. Thanks for joining right before this long Memorial Day weekend. I am so thrilled to be here, and frankly a little bit nervous, I have to say. I didn't think I would be a little jittery, so hopefully it'll kind of wear off as we get into kind of my comments. As Gary said, I started my career in big companies. So I've been with PepsiCo, with Frito-Lay. I got Hostess out of bankruptcy. So I actually was responsible for Twinkies still being in the universe. So when you talk about starting in the evil empire, I spent about 25 years in really big companies. And then I had the opportunity to join Rudy's Organic Bakery here in Boulder as a CEO. And up until that point, and that was a little over 10 years ago, I had really never had any entrepreneurial experience. I'd only been with big companies and big infrastructures with lots of support. And then when I went to Rudy's, it was a much smaller company and one that was financially struggling. But the entrepreneur, the founder of Rudy's, Sheldon Romer, who's an amazing man, had left the company a couple of years before. So my first experience in natural and organic was not with any founder. It was almost like running a little version of a big company, although in a very new space. So my first interaction with entrepreneurship was something called the Unreasonable Institute that some of you may know about. It was an accelerator for young entrepreneurs around the world. And now I'm actively involved in something called Watson Institute, which is actually an alternate education forum for entrepreneurs. And so I got deeply involved with entrepreneurs about 9 years ago. And this is what happened to me. Was through Unreasonable, I was meeting so many amazing people, probably like so many people on this call, that had great ideas and they were going to change the world. But most of them were like 25 years old. And so they didn't have any experience, didn't have access to capital, didn't have access to mentors. And I looked at it, it was to be around these amazing young people. I thought, I'll never be an entrepreneur, but maybe what I can do is bring to entrepreneurs my experience about how you get things done. And so I got really, really deep in the entrepreneur space through a lot of mentoring work. And then most recently, I've joined Lilies about 2 years ago. And the entrepreneur behind Lilies is Cynthia Tice. And Gary, if you cue this back up in the fall, or you have to meet with Cynthia because her story is absolutely amazing and not really well known in the industry in terms of what she did before Lilies and what she did with Lilies. So I've got about 9 or 10 years now working with entrepreneurs, and it's just been an amazing experience for me. But when Gary asked me to talk to the group here, I thought, what value can I really bring since I'm not an entrepreneur and I've worked with entrepreneurs? I thought it might be helpful just to give you some of the war stories from my career that might resonate with some of you as you kind of think about the journey that you're on. And so with that, I'll ask Julie to put up a quick slide that'll just kind of orient us to the things I'm going to talk about. I have a career advice website called janeknows.com, and I started that about 7 years ago with the idea being that as I was running into entrepreneurs and to young people starting their careers, that there were so many recurring themes. So I wanted to have sort of a place where I could provide advice, and it would be a little bit more scalable than just one-to-one mentoring. So I have on my website this sort of little mnemonic called 5 Tips About Career Stuff. And my particular career journey is the topic that I'm going to talk a little bit about today. So the 5 things I'll talk about in my comments, the first one is don't be afraid of failure. We make the best decisions we can with the information we have at the time, and I'll give some examples. Lead by the golden rule, which sounds like such an old person's thing, but I have to tell you, it is absolutely a way to navigate your life and your career. Control what you can control. I think this is especially relevant during these times where it feels like there's so many things that are out of control. The 4th thing I'll talk about is surrounding yourself with a personal advisory board. I didn't do that till recently, and I'll tell you a couple of my horror stories about if I would have had an advisory board, some decisions that I could have made a little bit better. And then finally, the last tip is not mine, it's Winston Churchill's, and it's never let a good crisis go to waste. And I want to share a story from 9/11 and a story about what we're doing with Lilies right now. So with that, Julie, if you want to take that down, I'll kind of hit each one of these. So the first one, don't be afraid of failure. We make the best decisions that we can with the information we have at the time. you know, we're using this now every day at Lilies because the world in the last 2 months has changed so dramatically, and it continues to change. And so every time we make a decision, and we've made a couple that are not great and a couple that are really good, we don't reflect on it as if, oh, we really screwed up on that. Instead, we sort of say, okay, what did we learn from that, and how do we kind of move forward? So when you think about decisions that you're forced to make right now, don't go into it fear-based. Don't go into it like it's either a win or a lose. Go into it with, do you have the information that you have? Are you making the best decision that you can at this very time? And if you can kind of live in that world, I think I didn't realize it until I came to Lilies, and we talk about this all the time. I think it's been something in my whole life that has just been a continuing theme. And if we had a couple of hours to go through my 35-year career, where you'd find that I've had more failures than I've had successes, I think maybe I had to kind of cling to that to actually get through some of the rough times. So let me just start with that and just say, try to be comfortable as you can with failure, and not be too judgmental on yourself with that, and realize that if you collect the right information, you'll make the best decision that you can. The second one about leading by the golden rule, this is something that really impacted me early in my career. And I want to tell you a story from my days at Pepsi, because it was something that very dramatically changed my leadership style and how I look at the world as a leader. And maybe you'll have some experience that'll happen to you that you can take the same cues from. So back in the day, a really long time ago, I was a brand manager at Mountain Dew. And back in the day, carbonated soft drinks were barely growing. Mountain Dew hadn't been growing at all. And we were just getting ready to introduce Diet Mountain Dew. So for any of you that knows any of the history about Diet Mountain Dew, you know that was a long time ago. So it was going to be a big success. We'd had it in test market, and I was getting ready to give a presentation to all of senior management at Pepsi. Now, for anybody that's on the call that's actually worked for a big company, you know that you never give a rogue presentation. That's like not a thing. You're not going to walk in and all of a sudden like surprise everybody with slides. So I have gone through probably 5 layers of management, everyone who has seen it and approved it. And so by the time you actually show up to present to Gary as the most senior guy, you know, you're like totally ready for it, right? You practice it, it's been approved, and you're just kind of waiting for everybody to sort of stand and cheer and like say, Jane Miller, aren't you like somebody special? So I get up, and it's an hour-long presentation. So it's slide number 1. In those days it was slides, but imagine on the screen, slide number 1. And I say, next year, Mountain Dew is going to grow at 15%. Now remember, Mountain Dew hadn't been growing, and carbonated soft drinks were pretty much flat, and everybody in this room has already approved it except for the most senior person. So there's like 30 people in there and all my bosses. And so I'm standing there waiting for the applause, because Mountain Dew is going to grow at 15% in the next year. The most senior guy, who's in the back of the room, says in front of everybody, Jane, how do you look yourself in the mirror with a number like that? As soon as we get out of this meeting, I'm going to find someone who's going to take your place, someone who can stand up and show up with a bigger number than 15%. Wow. Now, imagine, first of all, that happening. But second, when you're thinking that you're going to be giving this great presentation and everyone's going to be applauding. So the worst of it though, and the thing is about that I'll lead into the golden rule, is no one in that room who had approved the presentation said anything. Everybody just sat on the sideline and watched this man skewer me in front of the 20 or 30 people. And so there's a lot of things that could have happened. I could have started crying, which is what I wanted to do, actually. I could have ran out of the room, or I could do what I did, which was finish with the presentation, because that's what you do, and you've already...
You should have gone and poured a Mountain Dew on his head.
Yeah. I know. I wish I would have had the guts to do that. It was so incredibly intimidating. It was totally a jerk. But coming out of that, and why I like to say lead by the golden rule, is what I learned in that was not that that guy was a jerk, but it was that nobody stood up for me, or that nobody told me in advance that that's what he did. And everybody in the room knew that that was the guy that he was. And so imagine giving a presentation where you're literally naked in front of a group of people and nobody supported me. So when you talk about the golden rule about doing unto others as you want them to do unto you, for me, it changed my management style, Gary, for the rest of my career. I would always have the back of anyone who works for me. No one is ever out on a plank by themselves. No one is ever feeling like they are going to be in a risky situation. And it was a life-changing experience. So whatever that do unto others is for you, for me, it's how you treat people that work with you and how you have their back. So that was really a big life lesson. The second one, again, which is kind of important in this time, is controlling what you can control, because there's so much stuff around us that we don't have any control of. But what we do have control of is ourselves and how we react to things. So my next story is also about Pepsi. I had quite a few really great experiences in the Pepsi organization, good and bad and informational. So in this particular case about control what you can control, this is right around the same time. I can't remember if it was right before or right after the Mountain Dew experience. But the senior vice president of my division, not the guy, not the jerk, but a different senior vice president, you know, there's lots of those guys in big organizations, had called me into his office. And I kind of assumed, like, you know, any young professional, that I'm getting promoted, you know, like, why else do you get, like, you know, brought into somebody's office? And so I sit down, and he was a very serious man. And, you know, because soft drinks is serious business. And, you know, back in that day, everybody wore suits. And so I kind of roll in and I'm like, hey, John, how are you? And this is what I did this weekend. And he's like sitting there very serious, because soft drinks are very serious business. And so finally I kind of quiet down a little bit. And he says, Jane, we think you have potential. And, you know, the little bubble over my head is, and I'm sitting up a little bit more like, okay, they finally got it, right? That I've got potential. He goes, but we think you've got potential, but we got a problem. Like, potential problem. I don't know what that could be. He goes, yeah, so we think you got potential, got a problem. Here's what it is. Your style is getting in the way of you being successful here. Wow. And it's just not working. And so what we want to do is we want to send you 3 days one-to-one with a psychologist who can help you work on your style. So imagine if you're kind of liking your style, but being told by this most senior person that your style isn't working, and you're going to go to, like, meet with this Stepford wives or something to change your style. And you kind of go, what could that possibly be about? And, you know, you'd like, again, the bubble over your head is like, you know, what do you say to this guy? And so I go home to my husband, Michael, and I said, Michael, they like want to send me 3 days one-to-one with a psychologist. He said, you know, I bet that's really expensive. So, I mean, so I think maybe they actually do believe you have potential, and maybe this is their way in really investing in you. So why don't you go, see what they have to learn, or, you know, what you have to learn. And then you can, you know, decide from there. So I was tearfully, there was a lot of crying early in my career. So if any of you are young in your career and you feel like you're crying a lot, that's like a thing.
I'm crying right now, Jane.
I guess there's no age bias on crying. So I go to meet with Marci Zaroff, PhD, and we spend, you know, 3 days together. And this is what I found out. And this is the simplest way to talk about it. And I'll come back to control what you can control. I went to Pepsi. I came from Frito, and Frito was much more informal, and Pepsi, you know, was very serious because it's soft drinks. And my style was super informal. And when I came to Pepsi, I kept that really informal style. And what I found was people didn't really listen to me very much, and I couldn't really understand why. And the analogy that Marty gave to me was, I was speaking French, and everybody at Pepsi was speaking German. And the more I spoke French, and the more I was Jane Miller, larger than life, and the more they were very serious about soft drinks, the less that they would listen to me. So I had a couple of choices coming out of this, which is, once you know that, you know you're speaking French and they're speaking German, you have a couple of things you can do. You could say, I'm never learning German, and I'm only going to speak French. Or you could say, to be successful in this environment, I need to learn German. But this goes back to controlling what you can control. Once I knew that, I was in control, because I knew what the rules of the game were. So what I would really ask everybody here, you know, on the call, is to really think seriously about the environment you're in. You may choose to not be in it, but if you're going to be in it, play to win and control what you can control. So you might wonder sort of what's spoiler alert on that. I stayed there probably for another year, and then went back to Frito, where I could be Jane Miller versus serious soft drink gal. My fourth thing is advising yourself, surrounding yourself with a personal advisory board. Now, this is super important. this isn't like a board of directors where you have really heavy hitters that are surrounding you all the time and that are giving you sagely advice. This is about having a network of people that you can reach out to and ask questions and get their advice. And a good friend of mine, Rachel Shane, actually came up with this idea of being a 5-minute mentor, where instead of sort of saying this person's stuck with me as my mentor and it's a heavy lift, literally identify someone like Gary or Jane or Mark Retzlaff or whoever you might know in your universe, and be really succinct and have like a question for them that they can answer to really be able to kind of have your own informal advisory board. So for me, I told you about Michael, my husband. He was my only advisory board, and he was not a good advisory board, because this is what would happen. I would come home from like the media at Pepsi and I'd say, Michael, I hate those guys. And he'd be like, Jane, I hate those guys. And I'd be like, Michael, I'm going to quit that company. And he'd be like, Jane, you should quit that company. Well, I eventually did, in that sort of like craziness. But if I would have had Gary and called Gary and sort of say, Gary, these are the situations, Gary probably would have said, you know, I think you should quit, but get a job first, or like have something lined up. Just don't like quit like a crazy idiot, which is kind of what I did. But that's sort of another story for another time. So finally, never let a good crisis go to waste. I think I came across that. A good friend of mine, Chris Bentley, who is was in the natural products industry for a long time, and now he's in sustainable energy, shared this with me. And he had a stroke, a couple strokes about 2.5 years ago. And so his life has changed dramatically. And I've really found him to be a great mentor for me and a real inspiration about how when things go bad, the way you can control what you can control, which is your attitude. But he shared this with me of never let a good crisis go to waste. And I love that line, because what I'm learning, well, let me step back to 9/11 first, because I think I have a few more minutes before we get into questions. Yeah. You know, during 9/11, I was running the Ora Wheat business. And Ora Wheat was based out in California. It was Ora Wheat and Brownberry and Thomas English muffins and Intimates cakes. And so I ran about 3/4 of the country for Best Foods Baking. And before 9/11, Best Foods was sold once to Unilever, and then very quickly it was sold to George Weston Bakeries out of Canada. And literally a month before 9/11, it was put on the market again. It would eventually be sold to Bimbo out of Mexico. So in the couple of years that I was there, the company had 3 owners, and then 9/11 hit. And I think I had maybe 10,000 employees at the time or something across, you know, like I said, 3/4 of the US. And it was this, you know, all of us remember where we were at and remember how horrible it was. And for me, what I learned out of that was that the thing that bound everybody together was the company could have been sold a couple of times, but most of the people that were there had been through like 5 other ownership changes. And it was really all about the people and the relationships. It wasn't the logo on the screen. It was about the people. And what we did was we literally went around to every plant and distribution center and created a video around the song, if you remember the Pointer Sisters, We Are Family, and had a group of people that kind of sang it. And we sent it out to every distribution center, there was hundreds of them, to hit all the employees, with the idea being that we were just so much stronger than what was happening outside of us, and sort of rallying people together around the humanity of ourselves. So I learned a really great lesson then. You know, the lesson that I'm learning now is, I mean, I've been doing this for 35 years and I've been a president or CEO for 25 years. And I have learned so much in the last 2 months. It's actually even hard for me to say it without getting emotional, because it's just so incredible. What I've learned about how our team at Lilies has just stepped up. I mean, it has been seamless in terms of people doing their jobs while they're managing kids running around, while they're like sitting on their bedroom, you know, bed, you know, because their husband's at the dining room table doing work for them. And what I've learned has been the importance of communication. Before this COVID situation, I would do a town hall meeting with my whole company once a quarter. So think about that, once a quarter. Now I do a daily email and I do a weekly town hall where we're all on Zoom like this. Now,
how many people are?
there's 43 of us now,
Okay.
up from 4 just 2 years ago. So we've hired a lot of people. It's been really fun. But so now we do, every week we have all 43 people, and we have people talk about what they're doing in their life, their job, their personal life. We have guest speakers. It might be a little bit overkill. We just did a survey on Monday, and I think everybody actually kind of likes it, but I think we can probably improve it a little bit more. But I go from once a quarter to once a week. And now I feel, Gary, like it was almost irresponsible of me to only be bringing the folks that were remote outside of the office, which is about 25% of our company, in only once a quarter. And so what I think the reason why we're going to actually come out of this stronger as a team is because, one, we're more connected, both on the business sense, but more importantly, I know more about people's spouses and animals and activities and the puzzles they're working on, and just like all the stuff that normally you just don't ever have time to talk about. Or maybe some of you already do that, but I never did it. I feel like I'm really like somebody who cares about my employees, going back to my golden rule. But I don't know that I ever took the time to be that connected that we are now. So I guess my final comment would be sort of in, my career journey here is this time to me has been incredibly powerful. It has just been this time of being able to, deal with all the stuff everybody's dealing with, with changes in volume and worries in the world and working from home and all that. But the power of being able to connect with people on a level that's so much deeper than we normally have in business, it's amazing. And I feel really, really blessed to be in the situation to have a great company like Lilies, and more importantly, a really good team. So just to summarize, don't be afraid of failure, lead by the golden rule, control what you can control, definitely get your own personal advisory board, and never let a good crisis go to waste.
It's such a beautiful summary. First thing I just want to say is at that moment where you were saying you hate those people and they sound very hateable, I would not have been telling you get a job. I would have told you get the hell out of there. So but I also would say that the key thing I just heard you say, you didn't use the word, about this greater connection with your people is empathy. You are in their lives. You are empathizing. We this idea that our values are our personal values are something we check in the parking lot before we go into the office, and we pick them up again when we come back out. The boundaries have disappeared, right? And I believe what you just said to us is you're more empathetic. You're more tuned in, which I think is really powerful. And those idiot guys you were just describing were clearly incapable of that, right? So Jane, I have so many things I want to comment on and question, but tell us a little about Lilies, though, for people who don't know. Just maybe give us some parameters around the business and what are your current priorities?
So if you're not familiar with Lilies, thanks for the opportunity to talk about it, because it's in this 35 years of career, it's the most incredible thing I've ever done, like on every possible level. And I just, I feel so sorry for all those people that work for me that are in their 20s, because they have ahead of them probably the bad bosses that I've had in the past, and I have all of them behind me. I have this in front. But Lilies is a no sugar added, low sugar chocolate company. And it's started by Cynthia Tice, as I mentioned, about 8 years ago. She was one of the very unusual brands that went national with Whole Foods. And the original line was 4 candy bars, and about 2 years later, a baking chip, which she expanded to about 12 candy bars by the time I got involved 2 years ago. So our real claim to fame is that all of our products taste great and they have no sugar. So, there've been no sugar products around for a long time, but the problem is they don't taste very good. And Cynthia was really able to crack the code on that. So about 2 years ago, it's like one of the most amazing stories ever. Her 2 children and an operations person were running this business that most people would probably have 20 people working with, and she had 4. She partnered with VMG. Wayne Wu was just on Tuesday. He's a great partner of ours. And I knew Wayne. I used to be on the board of Justin's for a number of years before and after VMG invested in them until they sold to Hormel. So I knew VMG that way. It's just amazing in so many ways. One, because we have an incredible founder. VMG is great. The brand is an amazing brand. We have tailwinds, which is 80% of people are trying to cut back on sugar. And
Right.
so, I mean, the COVID research shows that people are even going to try to be healthier coming out of this. So we've got great tailwinds. And then, you know, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I talk a lot about the team. I mean, I've built a team from scratch. Every person that has come on this team has been handpicked, and they're the best team by far. So, so our priorities, we have really done a lot we rebranded the business to this sort of look about a year ago, which was really important. It wasn't just like a fun exercise. It was to give us an umbrella to expand to new products. We are now in chocolate covered peanut butter cups and chocolate covered nuts and chocolate covered caramels and chocolate covered popcorn. We just introduced cookies to Costco. We have some white chocolate items coming out. So I think 2 years ago, my team wants to kill me. I think we had 13 SKUs, and today we've got, I'm going to say 70, and someone's going to really have a heart attack. But it actually is not as bad as it sounds. So there's a couple things that are peculiar for Walmart, et cetera. So we've gone from 20,000 points of distribution to the end of this year, we'll be at 200,000. We just hit, I guess, our magic number, 200,000. We just hit 200,000 Instagram followers last month. And so we're just really focused on changing how people think about chocolate, that you can really have that, you know, the research we've done has shown that people are really emotionally connected to sugar. And because you're so connected to it, you don't want something that tastes bad, but you can't believe that anything without sugar could taste good. So we're kind of the bridge on that. So we're on a mission. I mean, chocolate's got 93% household penetration, and we've got about 3%. So we think we've got an opportunity to
Good run. Yeah. So I'm going to jump around with you a little bit, and I can see the questions are coming in, so we'll get to them shortly. But I think you stopped short on your personal advisory board advice. Talk to us, because you said you snuck in there that it's something you've just done recently. And it's obviously not just your husband. We know that from your story. But I think that's really an important lesson. And of course, a theme of this whole series has been ask for help. Right. Or the way I like to say it is, if you don't ask, you don't get. But can you just elaborate a little bit? How do you use your advisory board, and what kind of frequency? Is it a board? Is it just people who you just have in your inner circle? How does that work?
So first of all, I think what you said is so important, and I didn't hit on that, which is most of my career, I was afraid to ask for help. I thought it showed like weakness that I didn't have. Again, I was in the big company, you know, environment.
Well, you have those ridiculous human beings.
Yeah, right. They just like just, you know, beat you down, you know, so much. So I think I always felt like I had to have all the answers. And one of the key things I tell people today is, oh my gosh, like none of us have all the answers. Even if you have as much experience as we have, you just don't have the answers. And so I think first being able to sort of get past that it's any sort of a shame. It's like failure. It's not a shame to fail. It's not a shame to ask a question or to ask people for advice. And most of us, especially when you get to be my age, like you live for people to ask you questions. Like, you know, please, like ask me a question. I like, you know, I have like so much to say. But in terms of an advisory board, I don't have a formal one that we sit down like our board of directors. I have, you know, actually a pretty big network of people that I, you know, reach out to and, you know, ask their advice on. I mean, just, you know, just a couple of examples would be, you know, Mark Retzlaff, of course, who's been on your show. And Mark was the first person that brought me under his wing and introduced me to the natural foods industry. He was so generous.
You've done with so many.
Oh my gosh, it was a life changer. He made me, in fact, most people don't even know I spent 25 years in the evil empire. Almost everybody thinks I like started Rudy's, which seriously, it was 1976 and I'm not that old. So anyway, so Mark was one. You know, my good friend Debbie Carosella used to be the CEO of Madhava, Luke Vernon from Luke Circle. I mean, I could probably name 20 people
Yeah.
that all I reach out to, not like, let's sit down and have a big, heavy discussion, but okay, like, help me think through this just a little bit. Sarah Bird is actually someone I really would like to call out. Sarah is someone that helped me with a big dilemma that I had when I first started at Lilies, and I had no one to talk to about it. So it's kind of, if you're an entrepreneur or you're CEO, it's kind of lonely at the top, and you do feel like you have to always be like dead on with your people. So I think if you think about having a network of people that you can ask, and not just rely like, Gary, you have to like have all the answers for me, but instead just sort of reach out to people based on some of their expertise, and have it be really informal. And again, realizing that most of us are really busy, I really appreciate when someone reaches out to me and says, Jane, I have one question for you. It isn't like I want to sit down with you for an hour and just kind of chat. Like, I have one question that I need your help on. And you may sit down for an hour and chat, but it feels a lot more focused than that kind of like, let's just kind of sit around and hobnob.
Yeah. Yeah. Really helpful. I mean, I think the point is, there's so many threads connecting here, but it's empathetic people. It's people who are, it's like family effectively. They have your back as you have theirs.
Right.
I'm going to ask one tactical question because, again, a stat really jumped out at me, and then we're going to go to the questions. 200,000 Instagram followers. How did you do that?
Well,
How have you done that so far? What's really, seriously, what's been working?
So our market, just as a point of reference, 2 years ago, I think we maybe had 15,000 or something like that. So just again, to kind of put it in perspective, our marketing team under Sarah Mice is amazing, and Emily Pearson under Sarah kind of leads the charge. What they have done that I would say is the most impactful is how personal they are, that they answer direct messages within 24 hours. They reach out to influencers in a really compelling and personal way. I mean, it's personal. It isn't like this mass, sort of messaging. It really is really, really tailored and personal. In fact, I mean, I'll have to like kind of rat on Sarah a little bit. I don't think she's on the call here, but we'll play it back to her at some other point, which is, I can remember Sarah saying, why don't we always have product in the picture? Like, everything I know about branding is they need to know it's Lilies.
Yes.
She's like, all right, Jane, that's like circa 1985. This is about personal. It's about lifestyle. It's not about wearing a logo. And I think just being that kind of tuned in, and really having a lot of fresh campaigns, personal and fresh, and being kind of aggressive has been the secret to their success.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that showing off logos thing is really old. All right. So look, we've got questions all over the map, and they're wonderful. I'm starting my, Jordan, I'm starting my own CPG company and launching this summer. How can I think about an online go-to-market strategy? Can you tell us more about what you wish you would have known?
Oh my gosh, Jordan.
Sounds like call your two people is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I would say I'm probably not the best person, but why don't you send me an email at J, the initial Miller, at lilies.com, and I'll connect you with somebody who can give you some good advice.
Wonderful answer. Question that is being asked here from Brian: how are sales during COVID? I've heard from a number of New York Metro distributors, and their bar chocolate sales are very weak in the last couple of months.
So we've kind of seen a mixed bag a little bit. Our business overall has been very strong, but we also have a very big baking business, baking chips, like Nestle Toll House. And so if you look at what's happened, right as COVID hit, baking chips, I think, went up 60%. Candy bars went up, I think, about 15% actually, and then they've kind of fallen down since then. So overall, our business has been on balance actually quite strong, but it really has been driven by this skew on baking, which is we've been pretty excited about, just because we've have built kind of a nice business around our baking chips. And then we also, I think, some of the other products, peanut butter cups are kind of perennial. So I would say our bar business is probably a little bit softer than the rest, but overall, the business is really quite strong. I mean, I was a little bit worried coming into COVID that, because you read about comfort food so much, that people would be like, damn the low sugar stuff. I'm only going to eat full sugar stuff until I like explode because the world's coming to an end. So we planned for like absolutely the worst. Like if nobody ever bought low sugar chocolate again, what was going to happen. And we've been happy to report that our business has actually been pretty strong.
Yeah. Do you have organic SKUs?
We do not have organic SKUs. You know,
you think about it?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. We are actually just starting to have a dialogue around that. And I think, you know, when Cynthia came out with the brand, everything's fair trade and everything's non-GMO. So let me just sort of say that to start with. I think, you know, what she was really concerned about, and we've tried to hold dear, is just the difference in price, that you had this first hurdle to get people to move from sugar to stevia. And I think wanted to make sure that that barrier wasn't too big from a pricing standpoint. But it is interesting that you bring that up because we do think that might be some.
Well, we're seeing, and again, we've been doing this series for 8 weeks. We've had the hundreds of companies who are part of the Institute. And I can say categorically, well, literally categorically, that across all categories, organic has been up. And it's because the circle has grown, because the number of mostly moms, frankly, who's the driver of organic, have understood that the first way to protect your family and their immune systems is to avoid unnecessary exposure to toxins. And I will say to you, as a bit of coaching, you know, but also to the people on, I look back. Stonyfield went all organic, all in. We own Brown Cow, so we have a, you know, in terms of the price thing, we have a Brown Cow yogurt is not organic, so it's non-GMO, so we have a smaller price cap. I look back with regret. I killed off a good natural non-BST, non-GMO part of our line because I really believed we needed to be all or nothing. I thought there would be consumer confusion. And it was really on the board of Applegate for a decade where I came around on that and realized, because Applegate has their antibiotic-free and their organic, and both have grown beautifully. And just I think it's a good moment to be looking hard at organic, and obviously it's enjoying quite a spike right now. Ron is asking, does stevia perform better than monk fruit with your products? Have you looked at monk fruit?
We have, and there are some other brands that have monk fruit. I would say that I think the taste profile is better. I think a lot of people have immediately sort of, our biggest kind of trial issue is people think stevia is going to have this really strong bitter taste. But the magic of what Cynthia was able to do was to create products, you know, sort of blended with the chocolate. You don't get that bitterness at all. And I think we haven't been able to get the same flavor delivery with monk fruit that we've been able to get with stevia. Yeah,
I think I've heard that from a few folks. So a neighbor of yours in Boulder, Matt Perry from Good Crisps, is asking, how has Lilies marketing changed in the last few months due to COVID?
Oh my gosh, it's been insane. I mean, I have to say that with all my direct reports, I mean, everybody has been, you know, killing themselves, but Sarah, her whole world has turned upside down. And I'll put it into kind of 3 buckets. The first one was, we literally in February at a board meeting, we said, yeah, you know, Amazon and online is good, but you know, we'll just kind of do this on the side and let it grow. Okay. Not so much anymore, right? So Amazon has become, and all kind of Thrive and all online stuff has been really big. From a marketing standpoint, from programming, you know, we were going to have this big travel thing in May, you know, pack your bags and go do, so, you know, so just from messaging, it's all about self-care.
What is that? I've heard of that.
I know, right? You're going to win a piece of luggage that you'll never be able to use for the next year. So the messaging has really changed a lot. I think the biggest thing though, Matt, that's changed is we have gotten really deep into digital couponing by customer and with Instacart and Ibotta. And that was a big shift. And we had dabbled in some of that stuff, but we really have pivoted to sort of say, especially with low household penetration, like I mentioned, how do we get more eyeballs? We know people are shopping online, they're ordering to pick up, they're maybe making their shopping list before they go into the store. So everybody is online. And how do we make sure that we're reaching them in that way? So the marketing team has had to just totally pivot from messaging to sort of the tactics to even thinking about our Amazon business.
Yeah, as I said earlier, reinvention is one of the key themes that's been happening along. So your percentage of online or D2C has obviously grown then in this last period. It's of total.
It's been absolutely crazy. I mean, I'll just give one little fact. We just turned on Lilies.com. There's no free shipping or anything because, it's kind of a place to go to find out about lilies, right? But you can still order on there. We were doing $3,000 a month. Last month we did $75,000. So again, just in the whole scheme of things, it doesn't sound a lot of money, but just sort of the difference from it's there to people. And our average order is $85. So people are going on and they're like, I need my lilies and I need to buy like cases of it.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. I live with a chocoholic, a chocolate dependent. So I understand perfectly well. Let's see. Question is, how is consolidation? This is from Dirk. How is consolidation of distributors affecting your business? Affecting your business, I suppose.
Yeah, Dirk, not really. Our biggest distributors are UNFI and KeHE. We, over the last couple of years, have added a number of direct customers too, and we have smaller distributors along the way. But I would say we've been really blessed in this COVID crisis that our head of supply chain, Phil Mason, has had amazing relationships with all of our co-mans. And Seth Manette, who runs our sales organization, and his team have been really tied in with UNFI and KeHE. And so we, until as of our latest look this week, we've had 100% case fill on all orders over the last couple of months.
Nice.
So I do think it has. So I guess that's a long way of saying we have not, thank goodness, been negatively impacted by any kind of consolidation.
Yeah, great. Sort of a sister question. Jean-Victor is asking, do you suggest using brokers to expand your brand, or do you recommend engaging your own direct sales team?
Well, we use a combination, but we mainly use brokers. And I think it's almost impossible to scale without having some kind of a broker network to begin with. That would be my bias. I don't know, Gary, what your point of view is. It's just really hard when you're trying to build a business to fill in all functions. And there's so many great firms like Presence that, can give you the arms and legs on the street that can help build the business. So I know everybody's always a little reticent. You want to have somebody that is full-time dedicated to you, but that full-time dedicated to you, it's harder to sort of hit all the customers. Although now that we're doing Zoom meetings all the time versus literally going to Bentonville and, Minneapolis and Jacksonville and stuff, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit easier, but I would say brokers are probably a good way to start especially if you're just scaling your business.
Yeah. And I think it's also important as you're getting going to look for broker strength in given regions. People get hung up on this national broker thing, but frankly, the brokers need to have you prove yourself too. So, this gets back to the advisory board thing. I think a lot of us know who's really superb. Katie in Hawaii, and Dan in LA, and anyways, we have our favorites out there. But I would also say an interesting phenomenon I'm noticing lately is that, these poor retailers, right? They're so bedraggled. First of all, their staffing is challenged, right? Because people are scared, and also that people have kids at home and they're unable to go. And frankly, some are unable to go in. And so, my son has a new home. I've become the fix-it guy for him, and I've been in Home Depot a bunch the last few weekends. And those poor people, they're all bedraggled. Their hours are long, and my son, Ethan here, in case you haven't seen Brandon, No, but he has somebody visiting. Well, truth be told, it's my daughter-in-law, not his wife, his brother's wife. She's been visiting stores here in the Northeast on his behalf, and they are so grateful for help now. Just getting that last 50 feet from the back to the front, they just don't have the. They're just stretched. And so Polly's been, literally doing what brokers can uniquely do, which is, and of course, there's also dirty hands and there's others. So I certainly think arms and legs, it may be of particular help right now. So let's see. Well, I don't know why you're being asked this, but I'm going to ask it anyways. An anonymous attendee, do you foresee an increase in ethnic packaged food retail sales?
Goodness, I don't know that I'm uniquely qualified
Yeah,
to
I'm not
answer
either.
that, but let's hope so. How about that?